Holy shit. I'm reading. Oh. Peter. Peter, I'm reading. I'm reader, Peter. Beater. Room. Oh my god. Hello. We're in space. Ain't that cool? A text message I've received. Hopping. We're going to wait a couple minutes before we start the reading. We will be right back. Oh. Cool. But what's going on? How's it going? I only need one more person to follow me. Then we could do the funny 400 followers thing. Oh god, my eyeball. Look at this. Look at this. Look how long it's gonna take to load. Ah, yeah. Oh, what a book. Alright, let's see if I can remember what happened last time in the book. House of Leaves and Houses in Blue. Chapter 7. Let's see, something is immortal and it's hungry. Endnotes. Animals in the house is weird. And they built a shelf. Cool. Is the music too loud? I put on ambient space music, background for dreaming, gaming, and relaxing. Alrighty. But yeah. Stuff about echoes and how they work and blah 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 blah. But all this, the mysterious far-reaching hairline trail, the absence of sun from the sky, the tremendous cold and the strangeness and weirdness of it all, made no impression on the man. It was not because he was long used to it. He was a newcomer in the land. A Chechaquo. Yep. And this was his first winter. The trouble with him was that he was without imagination. Jack London to build a fire. Each chapter has a little note. It's cool. Holloway Roberts arrives carrying a rifle. In fact, in the very first shot we see him, he emerges from a truck holding a Weatherby 300 Magnum. Even without weapons, though, Holloway would still be an intimidating man. He is broad and powerful, with a thick beard and a deeply creased brow. Dissatisfaction motivates him, and at 48, he still drives himself harder than any man half his age. Consequently, when he steps onto Novidsen's front lawn, arms folded, eyes scrutinizing the house, bees flying near his boots, he looks less like a guest, more like some conquistador, landing on new shores, preparing for war. Born in Menominee, Wisconsin, Holloway Roberts has made a career as a professional hunter and explorer. As travel writer Aramis Garcia Pineda commented, he is confident, leads well, and possesses a remarkable amount of brass ball courage. Over the past, some have resented his strength and drive, but most agree the sense of security one feels in his presence, especially in life-threatening situations, makes tolerating the irritating sides of his character well worth it. When Novidsen told Reston how Karen had explicitly asked him not to explore the hallway, and presumably Novidsen described the discoveries he made during Exploration A, the first person Reston called was Holloway. So Exploration A, he went into the hallway and was in there for like half an hour. Because his house is spooky and it has rooms and doors and shit that should not be there. Anyways, watch it on my YouTube channel. I got a VODs. Preston had met Holloway 4 years earlier at a symposium on Arctic gear design held at Northwestern University. Holloway was one of the speakers invited to represent explorers. Not only did he clearly articulate the problems with current equipment, he also focused on what was needed to correct the problems. Though a fairly humorless speech, its conciseness impressed many people there. Especially Reston, who bought the man a drink. This sort of friendship soon developed. I always thought he was rock solid. Especially with that cock. Reston said much later in the Reston interview that, yep, just look at his CV. Never for a moment did I suspect he was capable of that. As it turned out, as soon as Holloway saw the tape of the 5.5-minute hallway, which Reston had sent him, he was more than willing to participate in the investigation. Explosion footnote 5.5. Gabriel Reller, in his book Beyond the Grasp of Commercial Media, blah blah blah, suggests that the appearance of the first shortened tile of the 5.5-minute hallway originated here. Holloway probably copied the tape, gave it to a couple friends who in turn passed it along to others. Eventually, it found its way to the academic set. Why is it... Oh, well. Here, let me show you what I mean. Explosion note 5.5. Woo! Like a little star that you can barely see there. Once again, house is always in blue. As we learned in the Novidsen record, Jed Leader lives in Seattle. Ooh. Though he was originally from Vineland, New Jersey, Vinland. He had actually been on his way to becoming a career truck driver when a transcontinental job took him all the way to Washington. It was there he discovered the great outdoors was not just some myth conjured up in a magazine. He was 27 when he first saw the Cascades. Oh, that was a bad burp. One look was all he needed. Love at first sight. He quit his job on the spot and started selling camping gear. Hooray! 6 years later... What the fuck? 6 years later, he's still a long way from Vinland. Vine boom sound effect. And as we could see for ourselves, his passion for the Pacific Northwest and great outdoors only seems to have grown more intense. Consummately shy, almost to the point of frailty, Jed possesses an uncanny sense of direction and remarkable endurance. Even Holloway concedes that Jed Bush would probably outdistance him in a packless climb. When he's not trekking, Jed loves drinking coffee, watching the tide turn, and listening to Lau Love It with his fiancée. Hello! What's poppin'? How's it going, Fletcher? You got the artist thing. Because I credited you for emotes. What's popping? I'm reading. It's a book called House of Leaves. It's very good. We're not very far in it. Doing good? Hell yeah. What you reading? House of Leaves. Houses in Blue. It's a horror-ish book. Basically, let me put it away real quick. Basically, this family moves into a house. Spooky, right? It is a very interesting read. Family moves into a house, and shit's funky. Like, yeah. Like a doorway from the parents' room to the kids' room appearing out of nowhere. And also the room being 1/4 inch longer than the exterior of the house would allow. And then also a hallway in their living room that just appeared there. Houses in this housing market, that is scary. That is true. I mainly got it because it has funky page formatting. It's called ergodic literature. It's like, I don't know, like how a movie is interactive, but you interact with the book in that way. Like this part's fucking braille. I just found this page. It gets funky real quick. There's just, you know, blue squares in some of the pages. Some of the words are sideways. It's great. It's great. Spooky horror. It is interesting, yes. It is frankly terrible to read out loud. And so I've made a mistake. But I'm already not very far in the book. But I have to keep going. The other one I got is Blood Meridian, which is a different book. Words are sideways, yeah. It sounds pretty fun. Yeah! I've read a bit already. I have the YouTube channel. Is where you can find the other ones. Sausachu. Bob. Yeah, it uploads out of order. I love it with that. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. Why does this one have 193 views? Send me that one. What the fuck? Fascinating. But yeah, it's a good book. It's real fun. What you been up to? Continue reading though. I forgot where it was. Okay, I remember. She's from Texas, he tells us softly. I think that's where we're gonna get married. Yeah. Wax Hook cannot be more different. His name is Wax Hook. At 26, he is the youngest member of the Holloway team, born in Aspen, Colorado. He grew up on mountain faces and in cave shafts, just working and living life. Hell yeah. Oh no, my tea is in the way. Think about getting another cat. Another one? But why? Just wondering. Also a question, are you doing the thing where like you have one cat but 2 litter boxes? Because apparently that's what you're supposed to do, and I only have the 1 litter box, and I'm like, damn, that's crazy. I do like cats. I just don't have an apartment. I don't have enough space for 2 of them. That's what this camera's for. It's supposed to be for Raven if she ever comes in here. Before he could walk, he knew how to drive a Pitten. And before he could talk, he had a whole vocabulary of knots under his fingers. If there's such a thing as climbing prodigy, Wax is it. Wax is it. By the time he dropped out of high school, he had climbed more peaks than most climbers have climbed in a lifetime. In one clip, he tells us how he plans to eventually make a solo ascent of Everest's north face, and I'll tell you this, more than a few people are betting I'll do it. Why 2 litter boxes? I don't know. Because it helped, like, spreads their cat scent, and not in, like, the shit way, but in, like, a cat way. Like, the piss way. Making your apartment or house more comfortable for the cat. I don't know. I just watch like generic YouTube videos on how to take care of cats, because this is my first cat. When Wax was 23, Holloway hired him as a guide. For the next 3 years, Wax helped Holloway and Jed lead teams up Mount McKinley and down Ellison's Cave in Georgia, or across some Nepalese CWM. That's okay. The pay was not much to brag about, but the experience was worth plenty. Yeah. What was I saying? Yeah, it's just a bunch of stuff. It's like, oh, don't feed your cat kibble, because it's essentially giving them Twinkies. Give them raw food or like wet food. And I'm like, damn, that's crazy, as the auto feeder with kibble dispenses. Oh. Wax sometimes gets a little out of hand. He likes to drink, get laid, and most of all, boast about how much he drank and how many times he got laid. But he never brags about climbing. Booze and women are the only thing, are one thing, but a rocky face is always better than you. And if you make it down alive, you're grateful you had a good trip. Yeah, those people are very defensive about cats. Yeah. Like, some of... Like, you look at one wrong and people say it will hurt. Yeah. Like, some of the stuff is helpful, but the rest of, like... A lot of the advice the YouTube videos give are like... You're gonna be there for your cat at all times. And if you're not playing with it or making it happy, you're a fucking terrible cat owner. How dare you have a life and have a job? How dare you fucking, I don't know, feed it kibble? I'm like, damn, that's crazy. I'm gonna go to work. You have to be with your cat all day, every day. Excuse me. What was I saying? This, though, has to be the weirdest, Wax later tells Novitzin right before making his last foray down the hallway. When Holloway asked me if I wanted to explore a house. Houses in blue. I thought he was sure. I thought he was cracked, but whatever Holloway does is interesting to me. So sure, I went for it, and sure enough, this is the weirdest. On the day Holloway and his team arrive at Ash Tree Lane, Novitzin and Tom are there to greet them at the door. Karen says a brief hello and leaves to pick up the children from school. Preston makes the necessary introductions, and then after everyone... I wanted him to do a title drop. Fucked up. What do you mean? House is in blue. Look at the little book cover that's right next to my little picture, dude. Is blue. And then after everyone gathered in the living room, Novitzin begins to explain what he knows about the hallway. He shows them a map he drew based on the first visit. Tellingly, this hardly strikes Tom as news. While Novitzin does his best to impress upon the dangers posed by the tremendous size of that place. That says House of Leaves. Yes, and houses in blue. Tremendous size of that place, as well as the need to record in detail every part of the exploration. Tom passes out Xerox copies of his brother's diagram. Jed finds it difficult to stop smiling, while Wax finds it difficult to stop laughing. Holloway keeps throwing glances at Preston. Lamau. In spite of the tape he saw, Holloway seemed convinced that Novitzin has more than a few loose wing nuts jangling around in his cerebral cortex. But when the 4 deadbolts are last unlocked and the hallway doors open, the icy darkness instantly slaughters every smile and glance. Newt Colster suspects the first view of that place irreparably altered something in Holloway. His face loses color, something even close to panic suffuses his system. Suddenly he sees what fortune has plopped on his plate and how famous and rich it can make him, and he wants it. He wants all of it, immediately, no matter the cost. Studying Holloway's reaction, it's almost impossible to deny how serious he gets staring down the hallway. How far back does it go? You're about to find out. Novitzin replies, sizing up the man, a half smile on his lips. Just be careful of the shifts. From the first time they shake hands on the doorstep, it is obvious to us that Novitzin and Holloway dislike each other. Neither one says anything critical, but both men bristle in each other's presence. Holloway is probably unnerved by Novitzin's distinguished career. Novitzin, no doubt, is privately incensed that he must ask another man to explore his own House of Leaves. House is still in blue. Holloway does not make this intrusion any easier. He is cocky and very penisy, and following Novidson's little introduction, immediately starts calling the shots. In earlier years, Novidson would have probably paid little attention to Karen and headed down the corridors himself, danger be damned. Yet, as has already been discussed, the move to Virginia was about repairing the crumbling relationship. Karen would refrain from lying on other men to mollify her insecurities if Novidson curbed his own risk lust and gave domesticity a real shot. After all, Karen later intimated their home was supposed to bring them closer together. See Chapter 9. I love that. The fucking footnote says, read the next chapter. The appearance of the hallway, however, tests those informal vows. Novidson finds himself constantly itching to leave his family for that place, just as Karen discovers old patterns surfacing in herself. Later that evening, Holloway places his hand on Karen's back and makes her laugh with a line the camera never hears. Novidson immediately bumps Holloway aside with his shoulder, revealing, for one thing, his own easily underestimated strength. Novidson, however, reserves his glare for Karen. She laughs it off, but the uneasy energy released recalls Leslie Buckman and Dale Cordigan's accusations. Yet, even after Novidson's interjection, Holloway still finds it difficult to keep his eyes off Karen. Her flirting hardly helps. She is bright, extremely sexual, and just as Novidson always enjoyed danger, she's always thrived on attention. Karen brings the men beers, and they go outside with her and light her cigarettes. It matters very little what they say. Her eyes always flash. She gives them that famous smile, and sure enough, soon they are all doting on her. Novidson confides to his high eight, I can't tell you how much I'd like to deviate that fucker's, Holloway's, septum. And then later on mutters something somewhat enigmatically, for that I should throw her out. Still, aside from these comments, and the strong nudge he gave Holloway, Novidson refrains from openly displaying any other signs of jealousy or rage. Unfortunately, he also refrains from openly considering the significance of these feelings. The closest he comes, the closest he comes appears in a high 8 journal entry spliced in following his encounter with Holloway. On camera, Novidson treats what he refers to as his rotten feet. As we clearly see, the tops are puffy and in some places red as clay. Furthermore, his toenails are all horribly cracked, disfigured, and yellow, perpetuated, Novidson informs us, by a nasty fungus 2 decades where the doctors finally ended up calling STRESS. Stress. Sitting by himself on the edge of the tub, blood-stained socks draped over the edge. He carefully spreads a silky ointment around what he glibly calls his light, fantastic toe. Glibly? Glibly. It is one of the more naked moments in Novidson, especially considering its placement in the sequence. It seems to reveal in a non-verbal way some of the anxiety Karen's flirtation with Holloway has provoked in him. All of which becomes pretty irrelevant as Holloway soon spends most of his hours leading his team down that lightless hallway. Frequently, treatment of the first three explorations has concentrated on the physical aspects of that House of Leaves. Houses in blue. Florencia Calzati, however, shown in her book The Fraying of the American Family, no longer in print, how these invasions began to strip the Novidsons of any existing cohesion. It is an interesting examination of the complex variables implicit in any intrusion. Unfortunately, understanding Calzati's work is not at all easy, as she makes her case using a peculiar idiom no reader will find comprehensible. Example, she refers to Holloway as anything but the stranger. Jet and Wax appear only as the instruments, and the house is encoded as the patient. I'm gonna drink some water. Excuse me. Oh, shit. There we go. The Among Us stopped exploding for a second. No doubt inspired by Calzati, a small number of other writers, including the poet Elfor O'Halloran, have continued to mull over the dynamics brought on by Holloway's arrival. Without focusing too closely on the fine filigree of detail present in these pieces, a book in itself, it is worthwhile, however briefly, to track the narrative events of the three explorations and recite how, to some degree, how they affected the Novitzins. For Exploration 1, Holloway, Jed, and Wax enter the hallway, equipped with high eights, down parkas, hats, Gore-Tex gloves, powerful halogen lamps, extra batteries, and a radio to keep in contact with Novitzin, Tom and Reston. Novitzin ties one end of some fishing line to the hallway door and hands the spool to Holloway. There's almost 2 miles of line here. Don't let go of it. Erin says nothing when she hears Novitzin make this comment, though she does get up abruptly to get out the backyard and smoke a cigarette. It is particularly eerie to watch Holloway and his team disappear down the long hallway. While just outside, Karen paces back and forth in the light of a September day, oblivious of the space she repeatedly crosses, though for whatever reason cannot penetrate. An hour later, Holloway, Jed, and Wax return. When their high 8 tapes are replayed in the living room, we watch alongside with everyone else how a series of lefts eventually lead them to the apparent endless corridor which, again to the left, offers entrance into that huge space where Novitzin almost got lost. The Holloway's ability to shoot this trip hardly compares to the expertise evident in Novitzin's Exploration A. It is still thrilling to follow the trio as they investigate in the darkness. As they quickly discover, the void above them is not infinite. Their flashlights, much more powerful than Novitzin's, illuminate a ceiling at least 200 feet high. A little later, at least 1,500 feet away, they discover an opposing wall. What no one is prepared for, however, is the even larger entrance waiting for them, open to an even greater void. Two things keep them proceeding further. One, Holloway runs out of fishing line. In fact, he briefly considers setting the spool down, when two, he hears the growl Novitzin had warned them about. A little rattled by the sound, Novitzin decides to turn back in order to better consider their next move. As Novitzin foretold, they soon see for themselves how the walls have shifted, but not as severely as they had for Novitzin. Fortunately, the changes have not severed the fishing line, and the three men find their way back to the living room with relative ease. Exploration 2 takes place the following day. This time Holloway carries with him 4 spools of fishing line, several flares, and some neon markers. He virtually ignores Novitzin, putting Wax in charge of a 35mm camera and instructing Jed on how to collect scratchings from all the walls that pass along the way. Preston provides the dozen or so sample jars. Though Exploration 2 ends up lasting over 8 hours, Holloway, Jed, Wax... What? Holloway, Jed, Wax only hear the growl once. Okay, it didn't say and the resulting shifts are negligible. The first hallway seems narrower, the ceiling a little lower, and while some of the rooms they pass look larger, for the most part everything has remained the same. It is almost as if continued use deters the growl and preserves the path they walk. Aside from feeling generally incensed by what he perceives as Holloway's postured authority, Novitzin almost goes berserk listening to the discoveries on the radio. Reston and Tom try to cheer him up, and to Novitzin's credit, tries to act cheerful, but when Jed announces they have crossed what he names the ante-room, and enters what Holloway starts calling the Great Hall, Novitzin finds it increasingly more difficult to even conjure a smile. Radio psychologist Fanny Lambkins believes this is a clear-cut example of the classic male struggle for dominance. It's bad enough to hear the Great Hall has a ceiling at least 500 feet high, with a span that may approach a mile, but when Holloway radios that they found a staircase in the center, which is over 200 feet in diameter, spirals down into nothing. Novitzin has to hand rest in the radio, unable to muster another word of support. He's been deprived of the right to name what he inherently understands as his own. Langpin sees Novitsin's willingness to obey Karen's injunction as a sacrifice on par with scarification, though invisible to Karen. After Holloway's team returns, Jed tries to describe the staircase. It was enormous. We dropped a few flares down, but we never heard him hit a bottom. I mean, in that place, it being so empty and cold and still and all, you rarely hear a pin drop. You really can hear a pin drop. Fuck. But the darkness just swallowed the flares right up. Wax nods and then adds with a shake of his head, "It's so deep, man. It's almost dreamlike." The last comment is not uncommon, especially for individuals who find themselves confronting vast, tenebrific spaces. Back in the mid-60s, American cavers tackled the Santano de las Golondrinas, an incredible 1,092-foot hole in Mexico's Sierra Madre Oriental. They used rope, rappel racks, and mechanical ascenders to make the descent. Later on, one of the cavers described his experience. "I was suspended in a giant dome, with thousands of birds circling in small groups near the vague black cloth of the far walls. Moving slowly down the rope, I had a feeling that I was descending into an illusion. Fuck. I would soon become part of it as the distance became unrelatable and entirely unreal." Holloway plays the high 8 back for everyone. Novitsin's frustration gets the best of him. He leaves the room. It hardly helps that Karen stays, entirely engrossed in Holloway's presentation and the ghostly, if inadequate, images of a banister frozen on the monaster. Tom actually pulls her aside and tries to convince her to let Novitsin lead the next exploration. "Tom," she replies defensively, "nothing's stopping Navy. If he wants to go, he can go, but then I go too. That's our deal. He knows that. You know that." Tom seems a little shocked by her anger, until Karen directs his attention to Chad and Daisy sitting in the kitchen, working hard at not doing their homework. "Look at them," she whispers. "Navy's had a lifetime of wandering in danger. And let someone else take over now. It won't kill him. But losing him would kill them. He would kill me too. I'm gonna grow old, Tom. I'm gonna grow old with him. Is that such an awful thing?" "Yeah, but she's being flirtatious and a bitch." Words clearly register with Tom, who perhaps also perceives what a great toll his brother's death would have on them all, have on him as well. Another thing that just says see chapter 9. Fuck. When he sees Novitsin next, Tom tells him to go find his son. Based on what we can tell from the Novitsin record, it appears Chad soon got fed up with his class assignment and took off down the streets with Hillary, determined to explore his own dark. Novitsin had to look for almost an hour before he finally found him. Chad, it turned out, was in the park filling a jar full of fireflies. Instead of scolding him, Novitsin helped him out. By 10, they had returned home with jars full of lights and hands with sticky ice cream. Hands sticky with ice cream. Exploration 3 ends up lasting almost 20 hours, relying primarily on the team's radio transmissions, interspersed with a few clips from the high 8s. Novitsin relates how Holloway, Jed, and Wax take 45 minutes to reach the spiral staircase, only to spend the next 7 hours walking down it. When at last they stop, a dropped flare still does not illuminate or sound a bottom. Jed notes that the diameter has also increased from 200 feet to well over 500 feet. It takes them over 11 hours to return. Unlike the 2 previous explorations, this intrusion brings them face to face with the consequences of immensity of that place. All 3 come back cold, depleted, their muscles aching, and their enthusiasm gone. "I got some vertigo," Jed confesses. "I had to step way back from the edge and sit down. That was a first for me. Wax is more cavalier, claiming to have felt no fear, though for some reason he's more exhausted than the rest. Holloway remains the most stoic, keeping any doubts to himself, adding only that the experience is beyond the power of any high 8 or 35mm camera. It's impossible to photograph what we saw. Even after seeing Novidson's accomplished shots, it is hard to disagree with Holloway. The darkness recreated in a lab or television set does not begin to tell the true story. Whether chemical clots determining black or video gray and approximating absence, the images still remain two-dimensional. In order to have a third dimension, depth cues are required, which in the case of the stairway means more lights. The flares, however, barely illuminate the size of that bore. In fact, they are easily extinguished by the very thing they are supposed to expose. Only knowledge illuminates that bottomless place, disclosing the deep, ultimately absent in all the tapes and stills, the strange cartes de vistas. It is unfortunate that Holloway's images cannot even be counted as approximations of that vast abrupt, where, as Rilke wrote, fuck. Aber da an diesem schwarzen Fellow word den starkstes Schauen auf Gelost. I don't speak German. Fuck. Here's another footnote. To the German part. No idea. Actually, Lude had a German friend named Kiri. A tall, blonde-haired beauty who spoke Chinese, Japanese, and French. Drank beer by the quart, trained for triathlons when she wasn't playing competitive squash. Competitive squash? Oh well. Made 6 figures a year as a corporate consultant and loved to fuck. Lude took heed when I told him I needed a German translation and introduced us. And it turns out I met her before, about 5 or 6 months ago. It'd actually been a little tricky. I was leering about, pretty obliterated in the arms of a drink. Hours of drink, actually. Feeling like days of drink, when this monstrous guy loomed up in front of me, grumbling insensibly about bad behavior, something about concerting too much talk with too much gesturing towards her, that much of the grumble, that her bit, I understood. He meant Kyrie, of course. He even back then was a blonde-haired beauty, writing my name in Japanese and assigning all sorts of portentous things to it, things I was hoping to lead, or was it follow, elsewhere. When this prehistoric shithead, reeking of money and ignorance, interposed himself, cursing, spitting, and threatening, in fact, so loud and mean that Kyrie had to interpose herself, which only made matters worse. He reached over her and hit me in the forehead with the heel of his hand. Not hard, more like a shove, but a strong enough shove to push me back a few feet. Well, look at that, I remember hollering, he has opposable thumbs. The monster wasn't amused, it didn't matter. The alcohol in me had already quickened and fled. I stood there tingling all over, a dangerous clarity returning to me, ancient bloodlines colluding under what I imagine now must have been the very aegis of Mars, my fingers itching to weld them into themselves. While directly beneath my sternum, a hammer struck with the timeless bell of war, a call to arms. Hi, Raven. What's up? That's what I thought. There she is. Look at her go. Bye, Raven. A call to arms, though all of it still held back by what? Words, I guess. Or rather a voice. Those who I have no clue. He was twice my size, bigger and stronger. That should have mattered. For some reason it didn't. I was worried he ripped me to pieces, probably even tried to stomp me, and yet part of me still wanted to find out for sure. Luckily, the alcohol returned. I got wobbly and then I got scared. Lude was yelling at me. You got a death wish truant? Wish that was the thing that scared me, because maybe I did. Five months or so later, Lude arranged for me to meet Kyrie at the Union. I was late by an hour. I had an excuse. Every time I tried to open my door, my heart started racing for a bypass. I had to sit down and wait for the thumping to calm. This went on for almost 50 minutes until I finally just gave up, gritted my teeth, and charged out into the night. Of course, I recognized Kyrie immediately, and she recognized me. She was getting ready to leave when I arrived. I apologized and begged her to stay, making up some lame excuse about police trying to save a guy in my building who stuck his head in a microwave. She looked wonderful, and her voice was soft and offered me something Thumper had taken away when she hadn't called me back. Thumper is a prostitute the footnote guy is in love with. She even wrote down on a napkin the glyph she had created for me half a year ago to reflect my name in nature. Before I could order a drink at Jack and Coke, she told me her boyfriend was out of town, working on some construction site in Poland, single-handedly dislodging super tankers stuck in the dry dock in Gdansk or something. It was a dirty job, but someone had to do it. What's more, he wasn't going to be back for a few more weeks. Before I even took a sip of my drink, Kyrie was complaining all about people filtering in around us. As soon as I finished my drink in one long gulp, she suggested we go for a drive in her new two-door BMW coupe. Sure, I said, feeling vaguely uneasy about wandering too far from where I lived, which I realized, as I took a second to think that out, was absolutely absurd. What the fuck was happening to me? My apartment's a dump, there's nothing for me there. Not even sleep. Catnaps are fine, but for some reason deep REM is getting more and more difficult to achieve. Definitely not a good thing. Fortunately, I was falling under the spell of Kyrie's blue eyes, like sea ice, almost inhuman, reminding me again, as she herself had already pointed out, she was alone. Gdansk, man, more than half a world's spinning world away. What? In the parking lot, he slipped into her bucket seats and quickly swallowed 2 tabs of ecstasy. Oh, Kyrie took over from there. At nearly 90 miles per hour, she zipped us up that windy edge, known to some as Mulholland, Jesus, a sinuous road, running the Santa Monica Mountains, where she then proceeded to pump her vehicle in and out of turns, sometimes dropping down to 50 miles per hour, only to immediately gun it back up to 90 again. Fast, slow, sometimes a wide turn, sometimes a quick one. She preferred the tighter ones, the sharp controlled jerks, swinging left to right before driving back to the right, only so she could do it all over again, until after enough speed and enough wind and more distance than I've been prepared to expect, taking me to parts of the city I rarely think of and never visit. She dipped into some slower offshoot, a lane of lightless covers, not stopping there either, but pushing further on until she finally found the secluded spot she'd been heading for all along, overlooking the city, far from anyone, pedestrian or home, and yet was directly beneath a street lamp. As far as I could tell, it was the only street lamp around for miles. Seems all that twittering light flooding down through the sunroof really turned her on. I can't remember the inane things I started babbling about then. I know it didn't really matter. She wasn't listening. She just yanked up on the emergency brake, dropped her seat back, and told me to lie on top of her. On top of those leather pants of hers, extremely expensive leather pants, mind you, her hands immediately guiding mine over those soft, slightly oily folds, positioning my fingers on the shiny metal tab and small and round like a tear, then murmuring a murmur so inaudible that even though I could feel her lips treble against my ear, she seemed far away. Pinch it, she said, which I did, lightly, until I realized she also said pull it, which I also did. Gently, parting the teeth, one at a time, down, under, and beneath. The longest unzipping of my life, all the way from right beneath her perfectly oval navel to the tiny tattoo, a Japanese sign, the meaning of which I never guessed, marking her lower back. Not a stitch of underwear to get in the way. The rest very guessable, though don't underestimate the danger, which I guess really wasn't dangerous after all. We never even kissed or looked into each other's eyes. Our lips just trespassed on those inner labyrinths, hidden deep within our ears, filled them with the private music of wicked words. Hers in many language, mine in the off color of my only tongue, until as our tones shifted, and our consonants spun and squealed, rattled faster, hesitated, raced harder, syllables soon melting with groans or moans, finding purchase in the new words, old words, or made-up words, until we gathered up our heat and refused to release it, enjoying too much the dark language we had suddenly stumbled upon. Craved to, carved to, not a communication, really, but a channeling of our rumored desires. Hers, for all I know, gone to black forests and wolves, mine banging back to a familiar form. That great revenant mystery I could still only hear the shape of. Which, in spite of our separate lusts, individual cries, still continued to drive us deeper into strange tones, for mutual desire to keep gripping the burn fueled by sound. Hers screeching, mine, I didn't hear mine, only hers, actually. Probably counterpointed mine. A high-pitched cry, then a whisper dropping unexpectedly to practically a bark, a grunt, or whatever. No sense anymore. Suddenly no more curves either, just a straight away, some line crossed, where every fractured sound already spoken finally compacts into one long agonizing word. Easily exceeding 100 letters, even thunder, anticipating the inevitable letting go. When the heat is ultimately too much to bear, threatening to burn, scar, and tear it all apart, yet tempting enough to hold on to for even one more second, to extend it all if we can, by getting that much closer to the heat, that much more enveloped, would prove, which when we did, clutch, hold, postpone, and in fact did, prove too much after all. Seconds too much, impossible to refuse, so blowing all of everything apart, shivers and shakes, and deep in her throat, in 1,000 letters crashing in a long, unmodulated fall, resonating deep within my cochlea, down under the cochlear nerve, a last fit of fury describing in last detail the shape of things already to come. Jesus Christ, too bad dark languages rarely survive. As quickly as they're invented, they die, unable to penetrate more, explore anything, or even connect. Terribly beautiful, but more often than not inadequate. So I guess it's no surprise that what I recall now with most clarity is actually pretty odd. When Kyrie dropped me off, she burped. Fascinating. At the time I thought it was kind of cute, but I guess man-eater did cross my mind. Then as I opened the door, she burst into tears. All she was in that $85,000 car did not exclude the little girl. She said something about Gdansk man's disinterest in her, and fucking her, and even touching her. Running away to Poland, then she apologized, blamed the drugs still roaming around in her veins, and told me to get out. She was still crying when she drove off. In the end, the whole thing had been so frantic and fast and strange, and even sad in some ways, I completely forgot to ask her about the German phrase. I suppose I could call her. Lude has her number, but for some reason these days dialing 7, let alone 11 numbers, feels like an infinite stretch. The phone's right in front of me, but it's out of reach. When it rings at 4 a.m., I don't answer it. All I have to do is extend my hand, but I can't run that far. It never really arrives, not even the rest. There's no satisfaction anymore. Morning shrinks space, but leaves no message. Oh, okay, they got a footnote. But here with this thick black pelt, your strongest gaze will be absorbed and utterly disappeared. As translated by Stephen Mitchell, says the editor. Resistance to representation, however, is not the only difficulty posed by those replicating chambers and corridors, and as Karen discovers, the whole house is in blue, defies any normal means of determining direction. Apparently, while Karen had been struggling... Oh, fuck. Apparently, while Karen had been struggling with the explorer's invasion of her home, her mother had managed to acquire some number of Feng Shui master in Manhattan. After a long conversation with this expert, Karen is relieved to learn she's been putting all the ceramics, animals, crystals, and plants in all of the wrong places. She's still told to use the Pao Kwa table, I Ching, and the Lo Shu magic square, but to do so with the assistance of a compass. Since much of Feng Shui, especially in the compass school, relies on auspicious and inauspicious directions, it is crucial to get an accurate reading on how the house sits in relationship to points north, south, east, and west. Karen immediately goes out and buys a compass, this while the men are in the midst of Exploration 2. Upon returning home, however, she's astonished to find the compass refuses to settle on any one direction inside the house. House is in blue. Assuming it must be broken, she drives back to town and exchanges it for a new one. Apparently this time she tests it in the store. Satisfied, she returns to the house. Only to discover that once again the compass is useless. No matter what room she stands in, whether in the back or front, upstairs or downstairs, the needle never stays still. North, it seems, has no authority here. Tom confirms a strange phenomena, and during exploration number 3, Holloway, who up till then has relied solely on neon arrows and fishing lines to mark their path, demonstrates how the same holds true for a compass read within those ash-like halls. I'll be damned, Holloway grunts as he stares at the twitching needle. I guess all we've got now is your sense of direction, Wax jokingly tells Jed. Which, as Luther Shepard wrote, only helps to emphasize how real the threat was of getting lost in there. In light of the new development, and in preparation for Exploration 4, Tom makes several trips into town to purchase more fishing line, neon markers, and anything else that might serve to mark the team's path. It's always planned to spend at least 5 nights inside. Tom also picks up extra food and water. On one of these excursions, he even takes Daisy and Chad along. No high-8 records of their trip, but the way Chad and Daisy relate to their mother, details of the shopping spree, reveals how fond they have become of their uncle. Unfortunately, Tom also has to buy a ticket back to Massachusetts. With the exception of a few weeks in July, he has not worked in over 3 months. As Tom explains to Karen and to Vincent, the time's come for me to put ass in gear and get on with my life. He also tells them the time has come for them to contact the media and find a new House of Leaves. House is in blue. Originally, Tom had intended to leave right after Exploration 3, but when Vincent begs him to stay through Exploration 4, he agrees. Preston also sticks around. He had briefly considered taking a leave of absence from the university, but managed instead to somehow arrange for a week off despite the fact that it is late September and the fall semester has already begun. He and Tom both live at the House of Leaves. Tom in the study, resting crashing on the pull-out in the living room, while Holloway, Jed, and Wax, at least up until Exploration 4, stayed at a local motel. Oh, God, I'm getting tummy ache. From all the clips leading up to Exploration 4, we can see how both Novitzin and Holloway expect to gain a great deal of fame and fortune. Even if Holloway's team does not reach the bottom of the staircase, both men agree their story will guarantee them national attention, as well as research grants and speaking authority. Holloway's company will more than likely thrive, to say nothing of the reputations of all those involved. This kind of talk on the day before Exploration 4 is scheduled to start actually managed to bring Novitzin and Holloway a little closer together. There's still a good deal of unspecified tension between them, but Holloway warms to discussion of success, especially the idea, to use Novitzin's word, going down in history. Perhaps Holloway imagines himself joining Novitzin's world, what he perceives as a place for the esteemed, secure, and remembered. Nevertheless, what these short clips do not show is the paranoia growing within him. As we are all aware, the future events will ultimately reveal how much Holloway feared Novitzin would get rid of him, and thus deprive him of the recognition he had spent a lifetime trying to obtain. The recognition the house seemed to promise. Of course, Karen will have nothing to do with such talk. Upon hearing what the men are discussing, she angrily withdraws to the periphery of the house. She clearly despises anything that might suggest a longer, more protracted relationship with the oddities of their home. Daisy, on the other hand, keeps close to Novitzin, picking at the tiny scabs on her wrist, always sitting on her father's shoulders, and or when that proves impossible, on Tom's. Jaron turns out to be the most problematic. He spends more and more time outside by himself, and that afternoon returns home from school with a bruised eye and a swollen nose. Novitzin breaks off his conversation with Holloway to find out what happened. Chad, however, refuses to speak. Oh god, I'm feeling tummy sick. Alright. I'm gonna go do a lying down because my tummy hurty. Make sure you touch ass. Bob. Let me yeah. Bye everybody. Thank you for coming. There will be more later.